Well, welcome everybody to the first of our live podcast series. We're going to do this starting obviously today, but every Wednesday going forward for anybody that's in the inner circle community here on KinetiQ. Um, our first guest, our first guest is Kaycee Gracia, a friend of ours. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, that was right.
Cool, perfect. Awesome, super rad human that we met the last week or two and got to ride mountain bikes with and connect with last weekend, and figured she'd be the perfect first guest to come on and talk about kind of the intersection of kind of sports psychology, neuroscience, athleticism, and all sorts of other things that we might get into. So I guess Kaycee, if you want to give a bit of an intro and tell a bit of your backstory to get us started.
Sure. So I'm Kaycee. I am a current student at Yale University. I'm studying neuroscience there, and I do research specifically with psychedelics and their utilization in psychotherapy. Most of our work is with veterans and helping people with PTSD and manic depressive disorder, major depressive disorder, and things like that. But I met everybody through mountain biking, I suppose. And before mountain biking, I was a professional horse trainer and captain of Team USA, where mental health is definitely something that we try to take care of, especially whenever you're an athlete on that level. So I definitely go way back with this topic. It's one of my favorite things to talk about for sure.
Yeah. What would you say drew your interest into neuroscience originally? Were you already intrigued in it when you were a horse trainer? Were you already into it at any level there? Or I know you kind of said your backstory of what led you to school, but what exactly drew you in?
Neuroscience is really an interesting thing. I think it was a kind of multifaceted inspiration. My primary reason for getting into neuroscience was I read a book. It is specifically about this kind of, uh, how do I put it, mysterious chemical that we have in our brain, which is dimethyltryptamine, also known as DMT, one of the most potent psychedelics known to man on Earth. Uh, so that was one thing that drew me into neuroscience, which we can talk about in a bit. But another thing that drew me in was as I began my college career during COVID, I was really interested in kind of understanding like the beginning of everything. So I wanted to understand how the solar system was formed, how the earth formed, where life began. So I have my associates in geology for that reason. And then after I graduated with my associates and transferred to Yale, I kind of continued down that path. And as I understood how physical things came to be, I wanted to understand a little bit more about, okay, so what the beginning of life maybe started in this certain area, but like what exactly is consciousness? When did it start? What do we know about it? And naturally that started pointing me down the direction of neuroscience. So those two things are definitely the two biggest influences. And I've also kind of just been like a big nerd in general, watching different podcasts to learn about science and STEM related things, astrophysics, stuff like that. But physics is a little bit outside of my pay grade.
Yeah.
Thankfully, neuroscience doesn't really require that much multi variable calculus, so it was kind of easier for me to fall into that than astrophysics.
For sure.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you've been almost a lifelong athlete. I don't know when it all started for you, but what would you say would be that parallel between your athletic discipline and not even just yours, but the people you've worked with, that athletic discipline and the scientific curiosity? Where's the parallel for what that does?
Sure. So I was raised in Tennessee, and my grandparents had a big farm. My grandfather taught me how to ride horses, and he got me into it with my first like miniature horse. My parents also had a hand in that as well. So as I started learning how to ride horses, my passion for that slowly started to grow. And alongside that, my grandfather always pushed college incredibly hard. But the deeper I got with training horses, school kind of got pushed to the wayside. After I graduated high school, that was when I was recruited to be on Team USA, and I was on Team USA for about 7 or 8 years. And when COVID hit, all of the horse shows stopped, and I finally had a moment to breathe and to start chasing this other dream, which was to go back to school, like my grandfather always told me I should. And so I think as I was riding horses, the natural curiosity of things always kind of like weighed on my shoulders a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'm following this incredible dream of training horses and traveling the world and doing all of these things, but I'm really interested in also like expanding myself psychologically as well. I was reading all kinds of books and I always wanted to go back to school. It was just a matter of trying to figure out the right time. Because when I was on Team USA, I'm riding horses 7 days a week, sometimes up to 12-hour days. And it's really hard to be able to fit in, a full time or even part time school schedule. So, um, as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I just jumped on it and enrolled in community college at Suffolk County Community College, actually on Long Island, and best decision I've ever made, to be honest with you. So it was an interesting kind of like my life was going this direction, but my mind was always kind of going this way, and for lack of better terminology, I kind of rode the horse thing as far as I could, and then as soon as the day came where I was able to enroll in school, I just like sunk my teeth into it. And now I'm at Yale studying the craziest stuff I could ever imagine. It's wild. But
No, it definitely seems awesome. And just the amount we got to talk in person, I'm so intrigued by the topics you're able to just from a whim get to talk about. So that's why we're definitely excited to hear more about it.
Yeah. And some of the things, it's kind of why we were so excited to have you on, especially as our first guest on this podcast, because our whole, the whole thing behind Kinetic is that relationship between movement, athleticism, and then also the mental health side with, Kinetic being the energy of movement and then IQ being a nod to the mental side. And we were out being active, having fun, riding mountain bikes all weekend. And then you were able to just rattle off quick facts or knowledge on, exactly like, oh, what brain chemicals are doing this, like how this ties in, why the brain makes sense, why is activity good for balancing everything mentally as well. And it's kind of the things that we founded this whole like brand on. And then you were able to kind of immediately validate with like the actual hard science of why it all makes sense. So I guess we're just kind of excited to get into that connection between movement and mentality.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting how deep it goes too, because it could be something as simple as just going outside and taking a 15 or 20-minute walk, and then you come back inside and you sit down and you're just completely refreshed. It doesn't even have to be something extreme as downhill mountain biking and throwing these 35-foot jumps and whatever, trying no handers and whatever else.
Yeah.
It can be just being outside and just moving your body. I mean, it's amazing. It's almost like we're meant to do something with ourselves, It's like
Right.
biologically programmed into us. Yeah.
I
Like you should be outside.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good segue if you want to get into the details of like why do we like being outside? Why do we as humans why are we so pulled towards nature, towards physical activity, towards sports, towards movement? And then like we know that when we go move, when we exercise, when we go outside, it makes us feel better mentally. And like I know I go stir crazy if I don't ride my bike for a week. But what's actually going on, like I guess from your expertise, from your like from the what is your expertise and what is the neuroscience behind why all of that makes sense?
And to back that one as well, let's also compare it to people that don't get outside. What's happening to our brains if we don't get that time in nature, and just the difference between what's actually happening?
Sure. So I think one perspective to take is like we come from nature. We're like nowadays we're so acclimated to having this stationary indoor life that it's kind of, I don't want to use the word manufactured, but it's not really natural. We're not meant to necessarily be these sedentary creatures eating these processed foods and staring at, blue light computer screens, OLED screens, and hunched over all the time. That's not what we're meant to do. We come from, hunting and gathering and just being outside, and that's our roots really. And I think one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind is what we're experiencing now is not how it's always been. And I think by allowing ourselves that freedom to go back outside and revisit where we came from, it kind of instigates these, I don't want to, maybe not primal, but organic feelings in us. Like we know that we're meant to be outside. There's just something about having the grass between our toes and something about getting dirty and just playing or, working outside, whatever. I definitely think that it comes down to some sort of like evolution, like biological or evolutionary, almost like heritage for us. But realistically, what's going on like in your brain is when you're outside, you have so many inputs. You've got the wind blowing on you, so you've got your olfactory glands are being triggered. Your visuals are completely different than they are inside, obviously. There's everything's moving and you're feeling the grass, and I don't know, every single sense is triggered, and it causes parts of your brain to communicate that wouldn't normally communicate if you're sitting indoors playing video games or just on your computer all the time. There's actually, whenever you're being physically active, there's this really important protein that spikes. It's known as BDNF, and I believe that stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And often we refer to it as kind of like brain fertilizer. It's a protein that enhances basically neuronal health. It enables synapses to be stronger in between your neurons so that you learn quicker, you have faster reaction times, you recognize patterns faster. It increases neuroplasticity, to say it in the least amount of words. And when you lead the sedentary lifestyle, something happens where your BDNF levels actually kind of plummet. Whereas if you're you could go on a 20-minute walk, like what I had mentioned earlier, it increases your BDNF. You can ride bikes, you could go play football, whatever, but just being outside and moving causes your brain to increase its production of the BDNF, and it's incredibly healthy for your brain. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things is keeping in mind that we can challenge ourselves with books and reading and whatever, but the physical aspect of things is really what helps. It's really what like cultivates neuroplasticity. Reading and learning things kind of the traditional way challenges your mind, but you really need to get the balance between the mental challenge and the physical exertion to really have your mind health at its peak.
Yeah. No, I love that. And then jumping in also for anyone listening, just if you would be able to also define kind of neuroplasticity in simple terms, but also a two-part way of exactly as what you just helped us segue into the next part that I had curiosity on too, with movement coordination and just repetition, strengthening those neural pathways. Can we hit those 2 points too? Because I think a lot of us are very curious of that if you have it.
Sure, yeah. So basically, in layman's terms, neuroplasticity is the ability for your mind to work efficiently. So the more what's the word? I don't want to say neuroplastic, but the greater your neuroplasticity, the more efficiently your mind is working, the more synaptic connections you have, and the quicker your brain is able to communicate with the rest of your body. So neuroplasticity is truly the key to mental health or to brain health. And what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Pretty much just how that then gets to relate to the movement coordination and repetition that you're strengthening those neural pathways with the outdoor activities you're doing, even indoor movement as well. Just how strengthening your body strengthens your mind is a big part of our life in motion, mind in balance that we're all pushing and just seeing what does it do for just
Sure.
your mind, your mental health, all of it.
Okay. So I guess I could kind of walk you through somewhat of like what's happening in your brain whenever you're doing things. So you have, let's just talk about like motor senses, for instance. So you'll have a sensation come through your body from your periphery, which would be your hands, your feet, your legs, your arms, things like that. The signal comes through your central nervous system, up your spinal cord, into your brain, and then your brain is processing these things and sending it back out to where you can respond to where these senses are coming in. The importance of having a healthy brain increases the speed at which your brain is able to send out the responses to the senses that are coming in. And the key to that is having strong synaptic pathways. So you have these two neurons where one neuron in your brain might be responsible for, well, your neurons are very, very specified. You might have like one neuron that's like responsible for seeing if or receiving information if something is stationary or animate. It needs to communicate with another neuron to let it know, okay, this thing is moving, so this neuron needs to act a certain way. And within that little gap between those two neurons are a lot of little tiny receptors that are sending and receiving different hormones. The receptors are the key to the neuroplasticity. The more receptors you have in between those two neurons, the stronger the connection and the stronger the communication and the more efficiently they can talk to each other, so to speak. So as one neuron says, okay, this thing is animate, it's telling this other neuron, okay, you need to send a signal out that we need to move that direction to maybe move out of the way or move in the way, whatever. And the hormones going in between those two neurons have to be sent out by one receptor and received by another receptor. When you're physically active outside, you're increasing the BDNF that I spoke about earlier, and it's actually triggering receptors to grow in between those two neurons. And sometimes it will actually move receptors from one part of the neuron to the synaptic cleft to cause there to be more communication, if that makes sense. Is that enough? Is that in layman's terms enough? I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
think
I
so.
mean, I'd say so, kind of just as you're saying, the movement that you're doing helps make the connection to it all, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really like that flow state, because that's what I'm curious of too, of like that feeling good after a ride, just feeling good when you get yourself going.
Mhm.
If it's
Yeah.
just that flow state that kind of brings that
Yeah.
energy in.
Right. Yeah. So to put this, let me think. Flow state is enabled by having a very strong communication between all of your different neuronal pathways in your brain. And basically, that comes from the process of learning. The more times you repeat something, whether it be jumping a bike over a jump or even just sprinting in a straight line, whatever, the stronger the pathways are in your brain that enable you to do those things quickly, efficiently, more powerfully. And then as you continue to grow those pathways, it becomes kind of like second nature. You're no longer having to really think about, okay, I need to put my foot here and then put my foot here, and this is how much power I need to put into it. Your brain already knows, okay, this is how much energy is going to go straight into this, and it becomes like, what is
It
the
becomes
word?
second nature.
It remains second nature, and then you can start putting more energy into maybe learning other things as you're doing it. Like, okay, when you're jumping a bike, like when you first learn how to jump a bike, you're like, okay, I need to learn how to pump off of the lip. And the more you pump off of the lip, the stronger you get at it and the more efficient you get. And then you can start thinking, okay, I'm pumping now. Now let me learn how to scoop my feet to bring up the back of the bike. And then you can start piecing things together. And the best way that like I can explain this, the learning process is like if your mind is like a big field of grass. And as you repeat things, you're walking through that big field of grass and you're starting to make like this new pathway through the grass, and the grass is separating. And the stronger that pathway gets, the quicker you can make it across the field. And then maybe you'll say, okay, I know this pathway really, really well. And maybe there's a tree over here that I want to go to get some fruit off of. And so then you start walking this other way to learn a second path to get across. And so, over time, you'll have all of these different pathways where you can go across this field and you can get all of the resources from all across this field. But it takes time and repetition, and it's really fascinating how quickly the mind can do it as well. Like if you are trying to learn things, there's research done between people who are trying to learn things that are physically active and people who are not physically active. And I believe there's a statistic out there that I don't want to go and say what the statistic is, like the difference in the quickness of being able to learn. But people who are physically active and who challenge their brain on top as well as their body are something, I believe it's over 60% more efficient at learning any skill.
Wow.
Which I found it's over 50% for sure, but I don't remember exactly what the number is, but it's really interesting.
Interesting. Can I attempt to maybe sum that up and see if I'm picking it up? So basically, inside versus outside. So it's all about increasing the amount of inputs that your brain sees, right? So every
Right.
new experience, every new sense, every new thought creates a new pathway for you to have
Yes.
more cognitive activity. And every
Yes.
time you increase the cognitive activity, then it compounds and builds your ability to learn new things again. So kind of
Exactly.
stacking building blocks faster.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
then inside, your senses are so much more controlled because there's not as many inputs. There's not as many elements that you're exposed to.
Right.
And so something as little as feeling wind on your skin by walking outside, or hearing a bird chirp way over there, or a car drive by, those are all additional inputs that you otherwise wouldn't get by being isolated indoors.
Yep.
And then you add physical activity to that, and it compounds once again the amount of inputs your brain is
Yep.
experiencing. And then
Absolutely.
all of that brain activity just continues to compound and build and just expand almost like fractally instead of linearly.
hmm Yep.
Uh,
Exponential
that is,
growth. Yep.
that's
Absolutely.
fascinating.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
that's
cool.
really cool.
It makes a ton of sense. I
So
mean, it's like we were saying, it's the things that I know and believe in, but it's cool to, and have experienced for almost 2 decades of athletic experience, and I know that I feel better, and I always did better in school when I was, funny enough, in season for sports. Like I always, and so it's cool to, it's very validating and interesting to hear that. That
yeah.
why that makes sense from a scientific and a chemical neuroscience standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really, yeah, that was one of my favorite, or that is one of my favorite parts about studying neuroscience, is that, we have all of these things, like we see it experientially, but then to actually understand like the mechanisms that are at work behind the scenes is really cool. Like, oh, that's why I feel so good when I come back in from a run. I feel like I do my best studying after I'm done riding bikes. Like oftentimes you'll see me at the mountain, and I'll do the same thing with snowboarding. I'll take my homework with me to the mountain, and I have like a rule where
Mm.
I'll go up and I'll do maybe 4 runs, and then I'll sit down at the bar and I'll study for maybe an hour, and then I'll go back up and do 4 runs, and then I come back down and I study for an hour. And I did that like the week before I had my multivariable calculus midterm last year, and I smoked it.
That's brilliant.
That's fantastic.
It's really cool. Yeah, yeah. There's a beautiful balance between the two of those things. Absolutely,
That's
So
absolutely.
fascinating.
so cool. And honestly, that transitions even into the exact thing of what I wanted to ask next, of training the brain throughout the body. So can we intentionally train for better health? Like does this better mental health, sorry, like better brain health? And does this relate to that BDNF protein that you're mentioning? How do we get more of that? Or is it, what's the variations with that?
Yeah, I do believe that physical activity definitely helps increase your brain health for sure. I think whenever you are stationary, your mind kind of gets to a point where it kind of expects a certain setting. So
Mhm.
whenever you are stationary and you're sitting still, your brain gets kind of bored and it gets, I don't want to use the word sad, but
No, I mean,
understimulated. Yeah.
yeah,
Um
But even
it
if you
get,
break down the lexicon of depression and depressed, like, not the
yeah.
wrong word, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. We're made. We're biological creatures, and we're social creatures, and we've evolved to be created for stimulation. Like we're not meant to be like, there's this animal called the sea squirt, and it's in the deep sea. And basically, they're born with a brain, and they use their brain to eventually find a place where they like grow their roots into a rock, and they filter feed. After they establish that location where they are going to filter feed, they actually digest their brain, and they don't have a brain for the rest of their life, and they just stay there forever. That's not how humans are.
yeah.
We're born, and then our brain exponentially grows all the way through adolescence until about, I believe, 21 or 22 years old is whenever your prefrontal cortex is done developing. It exponentially grows because we're learning, and we're learning about the world around us. We're learning about survival. We're learning about relationships, and as the more input we have, the more wrinkly and strong our brain becomes. And that's because when we become adults and functioning humans, we have all these inputs, and we need to be doing something with ourselves. If we're not using the brain that we worked so hard to develop all those years, it definitely becomes understimulated, and depression sets in, and then you lose your sense of purpose and you don't have motivation anymore. And as you do things, what happens is when you're learning something, you're actually triggering your brain's dopamine center. Dopamine is for motivation and motion. It's responsible for movement and motivation. When you begin to learn something, it triggers the dopamine and you feel good. And you're like, oh man, like, wow, I actually just learned something new. Let me try that again. You trigger that dopamine reward again. And as you continue to learn, not only are you growing your brain, but you're feeling really good doing it. If you're not pushing yourself to learn these things, you're messing up your reward system, which is ultimately what will bring you to being depressed because you don't have anything to really help you become motivated anymore. It's really interesting.
So, in this world now of social media and having that dopamine hit in our pocket every time we pick up the phone, what's your take on that?
I have a lot to say about
It
that.
looks like it.
Yeah. So when you pick up your phone and let's say you're doom scrolling, we'll use Instagram or Facebook as the prime example. You pick up your phone and you see a meme for 3 seconds. It might be a funny meme, it might be an angry meme, it might be, I don't know, something in between. It triggers your dopamine system, but a very, very, very tiny bit. As soon as you're done seeing that meme and you see it on repeat, you get bored and you swipe. Next thing you know, another funny one comes up or whatever, something that triggers some sort of emotion in you. You get bored, you swipe. And as you continue to these patterns, you actually start recognizing what you think is going to be funny and what you think is not funny at a quicker rate. And so then you're swiping faster. And the faster you swipe, the more you swipe in a shorter amount or in the same amount of time. And your brain gets so used to having these immediate, even though they're minuscule, your brain gets used to having these immediate dopamine hits as you're swiping and swiping and swiping, that you find yourself in moments you'll have maybe sitting on the couch and have 2 minutes of boredom. You pick up your phone, you start swiping when you could be going outside, you could go on a run. Next thing you know, you're sitting on your phone for hours, getting these immediate dopamine hits, having learned nothing, having grown not at all,
Having made no connections.
and oftentimes destroying connections because you'll see something that pisses you off that somebody else has done. And
Yeah.
it can ruin your relationships with other people. It can ruin your relationship with yourself because not only are you messing with your dopamine systems and your reward systems, but you're also, what is triggering or what is ruining your dopamine system or your reward system is oftentimes something that ruins your perspective of something else, ruins your perspective of what is normal. Like, my body should be looking like this. Like, wow, that girl is really pretty. Maybe I should look like, why don't I look like that? Or I can't believe that person would post something so political. Like, that makes me angry. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start posting things that I think will trigger other people to like me more because I disagree with that. Anyway, there's so many there's so many things wrong with social media. I think the amount of time, I think one of the best things that they ever invented was the notification on your phone to let you know how much time you're spending on your phone every day. And if you look, like, I got a notification on my phone last week. It said I was on my phone for like, I think it was like 6 hours for the whole week. I'm like, you know, what I could learn on my bike in 6 hours?
Yeah, right?
You know, I could have ran I don't know what, 6 5Ks. I run it, I don't know, 5K is probably like 30 minutes. I could run 12 5Ks in 6 hours or whatever. It's insane to think that we have gotten to the point as a society where we're so addicted to this tiny little screen and swiping, and we even have to have notifications to tell us to go outside and walk. You've not gotten enough steps today. What do you mean I haven't gotten enough steps today? I'm a human.
Yeah.
That's all I do, you know? It's crazy. Society has definitely evolved to such an interesting point where technology is now telling us how to be human. Is a weird full circle.
And like, I'll say through some of the certifications I'm completing, there has been some comments towards a sedentary lifestyle practically being on the line of a disease at this point because of what it's actually doing, kind of destroying us. Not moving, and as you said, getting lost in the phone. And I'll say, a big piece that helped me is I had a stage of time, I was living on the road full time, and my phone, social media is how I stayed connected to what was happening throughout the country. And there was a point in time that I felt like if I wasn't paying attention to Instagram, I almost had FOMO. I had fear of missing out on an event being posted that I was maybe going to get to make it to, different BMX jams, different contests, different things I wanted to get to if I had the ability to. And I felt almost trapped by my phone at that point. And so I started setting timers to, there's timers within the Instagram app. There's timers even within the phone app. And I've set up nighttime hours. I have to actually acknowledge something on my phone to say, like, you've been on this app for this amount of time now. And I've set myself limits. And now
Yeah.
I don't touch my phone. So I feel like I broke that habit. But I feel like for a point in time, I fell into that societal norm of being on the phone, being connected with people all the time. And now I'm like a polar opposite to the fact I need to remember to jump back on my phone to get back to people that I love to engage with. So when it comes to unlearning bad habits and kind of breaking out of that societal norm, would you have anything that you would share on that?
Yeah. So back to the field. This is what's so beautiful about our grass field of our mind is, although the more we may walk one path, the grass separates. If you stop walking that path, the grass will grow back. So if, just like what you're saying, like you're setting the alarm on your phone, you're setting a timer on your phone, and you're saying, okay, I don't want to walk this path for 3 hours a day anymore. I'm going to set my alarm and I'm going to go do something else that's more cultivating. The grass will grow back, and then you'll start losing the desire to be on your phone nearly as much. I definitely think that setting reminders on your phone can change the way that you behave. Absolutely. And I think it's important too to use like small rewards that, well, I don't want to say small. You want to use things that reward you more than what your phone would. So I guess I'm just going to stick with the phone example. If you feel like you're addicted to using your phone, the best thing you can do is go out and do something that makes you feel better than your phone, which playing outside, being physically active. It's much easier habit to break than what people realize. But I think what makes it so difficult is it's a personal issue. It's not necessarily something that somebody else is ever going to, maybe you have a partner that could keep you in check about it, but typically you're not going to have somebody else come up to you and be like, hey man, like you're on your phone way too much, because they're battling the exact same thing. What makes it so difficult is it's just you by yourself staring at your phone and swiping. And all it takes is just a little bit every day. Okay, I'm only going to be on my phone for this long today. And instead of being on my phone, like let's say I'm usually on my phone 4 hours a day. Today I want to be on my phone for 3.5 hours. And that 30 minutes that I would have been on my phone, let's go on a walk. Even a video game is honestly better than being on your phone, to be honest with you. As crazy as that sounds.
I think I understand that one of, attention span for one, but what's your opinion on that?
I also should turn these lights on. It's starting to get kind of dark in here. I'm sorry, on video games?
Yeah, just why actually that on-screen engagement, the phone quick hit dopamine reward versus staying locked in, engaged to a video game is why that is still a better option.
Video games actually enhance hand-eye coordination. So the more you've got the visual input coming in, and now you've also got your hands actively coordinating with what you're interacting with on the screen. So there are proven studies where playing video games can increase neuroplasticity. Whereas whenever you're sitting and swiping on the phone, the only thing that you're increasing your connections with is just your thumb. And sometimes feeling bad and sometimes negative emotions. Like there are studies going on right now actually with chronic phone usage and increase in the amygdala size. Your amygdala in your brain is responsible for mood and emotion and oftentimes anxiety. The bigger your amygdala, the stronger your fight or flight reaction. And the more time you spend on your phone, scientists are theorizing that it strengthens your amygdala rather than your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for reasoning and logic. So video games, the cool thing about video games is that it's actually challenging you to an extent. You're going through these different levels, and every level obviously gets harder and harder. So you're having to do new things, and you're learning new motions, and you're really strengthening the connection between your hands, your eyes, and your brain. And it, for whatever reason, there's also been a really strong connection between people who play video games and people who are good at math. I believe it has to do with the part of the brain that it triggers, and I can't remember the specific. It's not your prefrontal cortex, but there's a very small area of your brain that is responsible for math, and somehow video games increases that part of your brain, that small little lobe of your brain. So I found that was really fascinating. But studies are still being done on that. There's nothing necessarily published yet that supports that theory, but because it's such a new issue, we haven't really had a whole lot of time to be able to study it. So keep your eyes peeled for those papers being published, and I will certainly send those your way as I find them.
Awesome.
That's cool. That's funny because I grew up in a household that I didn't actually have video games, just didn't exist, wasn't really allowed. It was, if you want to, no, go play outside. We lived in South Florida. There was never any time of the year that we couldn't play outside unless it was like a proper lightning thunderstorm. In the rain, we're still playing outside. So it was like, no, you're not on video games, get outside. And I laugh at that because I have always been really terrible at math. And I also have another segue on that because I have had past concussions. And so to relate it back actually to a question we got in the comments and something that we're curious about ourselves is finding out, both sides of it, whether it be on the psychedelic side or even just what we can train our own brains for, but the neuroscience and having just retraining your brain after positive effects with people with TBIs or long-term concussion symptoms, because I feel that one a lot with my past concussions, and I know a lot of other people struggle with it too. What would you say? Just because we kind of say, my brain went to that because we talked about math and just to.
I've got a similar question, and I wonder if we can stack them. You mentioned especially the prefrontal cortex, and it's kind of well known that like your brain stops, quote unquote, stops developing after a certain age, 21, 25, whatever it is, kind of in that early 20s range. So I guess two-part, the big overarching question is, what can we do to continue enhancing and improving our brains, whether it's just through neuroplasticity or I guess I'll start with a question of when your brain is done, whether it's your prefrontal cortex or whatnot, is there anything you can do to continue to develop and continue to strengthen your brain, whether it is neuroplasticity itself or you see what I'm kind of digging at there?
So
like
the key to
post 25 or post after that age, is there a way to keep that going, or are you just locked in? And is 22-year-old Bailey just all I get?
Well, thankfully, 22-year-old Bailey is not all you're going to get. So neuroplasticity is the mechanism of keeping your brain healthy. So everything that you do is increasing your neuroplasticity, whether it be physical or like physical training or mental training. So reading books is exceptionally good for increasing neuroplasticity. Math, the game, actually my grandfather, when he entered his geriatric days, his doctor actually told him that one of the best things that he could recommend is playing Mahjong, the video game. For whatever reason, it's great for memory, and it substantially helps people in their older years kind of stay mentally active. So math, reading, Mahjong, video games, all those types of things where you're actually challenging your mind and putting effort into learning new things is really the key to maintaining and increasing your neuroplasticity. Whenever you do those things, all of those contribute to increasing your BDNF. So actually, this was actually something that I learned on Instagram, ironically. So social media is not always entirely bad. It obviously has its perks. I follow several pages about neuroscience and things, and you guys may have seen me repost this the other day. But I did read the paper that they posted about, and one of the best things that they have found to help increase neuroplasticity is to learn new languages, which I found so fascinating because not only does learning a language enable you to communicate with other people and open up new doors to entirely new worlds, but the thing about language is every language has different sentence structure. So
Sure.
you're learning new words for new things. And whenever you switch from language to language, you're actually changing which pathway your brain is kind of communicating through. So speaking English, you have very specific pathways in your brain that you'll work through to speak English. But whenever like I switch to speaking Spanish, it's a completely different pathway. It's so cool. And then
Yes.
you have people who are polyglots. So they'll speak, 3+ languages, and every single one of those languages triggers a different pathway in the brain. So language learning is one of the best ways of increasing neuroplasticity. And they're building off of that research now to say, okay, how many people that we see with Alzheimer's, how many of these people speak one language and how many of these people speak 2, 3 plus? And they're theorizing that the fewer languages that you speak actually it's not that it could contribute to your chances of getting Alzheimer's, but the more languages that you speak decreases your chances of getting Alzheimer's, if that makes sense.
Very cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the more effort you put in to learning new things, and the stronger you build these neuronal connections in your mind, and the more memories you try to make, you put the effort in to make, the healthier your brain will be now and in the future. So everything that you learn now, the more you challenge yourself now sets you up better for your future. If you're not challenging yourself, it is proven that you are increasing your chances of getting Alzheimer's, which is a brain neurodegenerative disease, obviously. So video games, languages, math, reading, writing, riding bikes, going on runs,
Yeah.
whatever. As long as you're putting effort in, you're really pushing yourself to do something that you haven't before, you are setting yourself up for a very healthy brain in the future, for sure.
Yeah, so looping that back to athleticism, it's like that do hard things, no matter what type, but throughout life. I think there's a lot of people that they hit a certain age, and even though they may have always been an athlete in the past, they just decide aches and pains, or, a life circumstance may happen that puts them down and out. But what's something that you would maybe want to share to help either motivate or inspire people to always keep moving, always keep growing, always keep learning?
Oh man, just don't stop. I don't. I really don't know anything more raw than just live.
Mm.
That's your whole purpose. And just because you're entering a new phase where you feel like, okay, my body can't do what it used to, doesn't mean that your body can't. It
Yeah.
just means that you maybe have to do it in a different way. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And, eventually the three of us are going to get to an age where we're not going to be, riding upper dominion and lower dominion and doing all these crazy black diamond tech lines and stuff. And that's okay. But we will continue doing. And
Mhm.
that's why we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Where as humans, we're developed to move and we're developed to live. And if you succumb to staying inside of your comfort zone, that's all you're ever going to get.
Mhm.
Is you're just going to, your comfort zone is going to continue to shrink as you get older and older. And you don't want to get trapped into that. What makes us feel, we're in our 30s now. What makes us feel like we're back in our teens is us forcing ourselves outside of our comfort zone all the time. We were
Yeah.
joking about it when we were seshing Lower Dominion. I'm like, I feel like a little kid. I'm
Yeah.
like, sometimes I'll forget to even drink water. I'm just having so much fun. Just and don't stop doing. Just never stop doing.
Yeah.
The things that can trigger your happiness and growth don't always have to be things that threaten your physical health, or your physical safety. It can be, learning a new video game, learning a song, playing an instrument, whatever. But definitely like marry your brain to staying uncomfortable.
Mhm.
That's where the growth happens.
No, that's a huge point. And something I do even want to add to that, just because you say, just don't stop. I know that can be extremely difficult for people that have faced, whether it be injury or just other major life changing circumstances. So I kind of want to speak on that point too, because I had a traumatic spine injury when I was 19 that could have put me down and out. And I had that questioning stage of life of, will I be able to ride a bike again? Can I do this again? And I said to myself, even if it is only at a state of rolling on my bicycle, my bike has been my heart and soul my entire life. So at any level, any capacity I can do this at, this is still what makes my heart happy. And so I can't not allow myself to not see that I will get back to it. And I think that's something that got me through that injury and got me back to the life, got me even better than the life I was living before. And I'm a way better rider than I was before that ever happened. I'm a stronger athlete. I'm stronger mentally because of it. And I think that the point you made, I kind of just wanted to piggyback on that because I think a lot of people struggle with that. And especially to know that when something happens, it's something that you can still learn and grow from. And if it has to segue you into a new passion, that's okay too. Because as you said, if it is, just continuous growth, but in a different way, keeping yourself out of that comfort zone so that your brain doesn't, you don't become sedentary no matter the circumstance.
That gave me chills. I love hearing about people's stories, like overcoming things like that, because I know that the mental game that plays in your head has got to be so challenging. I can't imagine how you were feeling, and I don't know. You're so tough, and it's so cool. I love it. But that's the thing about maybe not just mountain biking, because that happened to you in BMX, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the thing maybe about, let's just say, biking in general is the first thing you learn when you're riding a bike is, I'm gonna fall.
Mm-hmm.
And when you fall, you learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what you do with that fall that enables you to be better. And it's the same thing in life. You're going to fail at things and whatever else. And, you could have some sort of traumatic financial issue. But if you take it and you allow yourself to learn from it rather than just giving up and succumbing to the negative emotion of it, that's what makes you great. That's
Mm-hmm.
why you're doing all the cool things that you are now. I mean, it's so cool to see how your BMX riding has translated to mountain biking. I loved watching you ride the other day, and to now know that you went through that in high school is that's amazing. And a very close friend of mine, actually, we were riding a Mountain Creek, and the big Rainbow Bridge on, I believe it's Salvation. I don't know if that's Dominion or Salvation. I think Salvation. Mm-hmm. He overshot the Rainbow Bridge, broke his back. He broke 8 vertebrae, a collarbone, punctured a lung, and got concussed, I believe was everything.
How hard did he juice it?
Hard. Completely. So the idea was...
And I take it he's okay, sorry. That sounds like, for anybody else listening, that sounds like an absolute, insensitive, insane statement to make to that. But in the energy of bikes, that is a...
The idea was he was going to overshoot, or he was going to jump it, but nose bonk the top of it and then ride down. But he was a little late on the nose bonk, and whenever he went to nose bonk, he actually ended up just pushing the nose of the bike over the edge and went completely OTB, and his back landed on a rock. And he got helicoptered out and was in the hospital for 2 weeks, I think, or something like that, close to 2 weeks. And I was there for the whole thing. I went to see him in the hospital I watched it happen. I was actually going under the Rainbow Bridge while he was going over it. And I just happened to wreck at the exact same time too. And I heard him, and I was like, I need to go check on that guy. And I come around a corner, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that guy. That's my guy. And so yeah, I went to see him in the hospital every single day after that. And the mental game that plays is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Stuck on a couch, bedridden, for weeks, but every single day. And this was before I was a neuroscience major. This was before I was in school or anything. Every single day he got on he was sitting there, and he would play video games with his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd play video games with his friends, and they would play bicycle games. What's that game? Steep? I think it's called Steep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they would mountain bike together and everything. Yep. He would be like, I'm going to ride my bike again. I'm going to ride my bike again. Within 3 months, he was running a 5K.
Amazing.
Insane. And now he's one of the best mountain bikers I know. That was in 2020. I think that was 2020. And he's one of the best mountain bikers I know now. But it's about forcing your mind outside of that comfort zone, because your brain is actually programmed to want to keep you safe.
Mhm.
The whole idea of having a brain is for survival and reproduction.
Yeah.
It's not to hurl ourselves down a mountain and force ourselves into danger. It's to keep us safe. So you
Yeah.
have to like consciously push yourself outside of that boundary that your brain is trying to create, because it's like, I don't ever want to get hurt. I don't want to do anything that's going to threaten my livelihood or whatever. And sitting there and saying, I'm going to ride my bike again, even if it's just a roll, like what you were saying, that
Yeah.
is the beginning of creating that new pathway. Whenever you're hurt and you can't move, you're in a completely different field of grass. This
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
a whole nother world that we're not familiar with. But sitting down and saying, I'm going to ride my bike, if you're visualizing riding your bike, you're like, I'm going to roll on my bike one day, or he's playing video games. You're starting to create those new pathways, and you're
Mhm.
breaking yourself out of that comfort zone of staying in fear. It's
Mhm.
amazing. It's amazing what just like a simple like shift in perspective can do for your mental health, for sure.
Yeah. And we're getting close to our mark of just getting to open up the room for Q&A, so I don't wanna drag on, too much longer
Right.
on it, but I'm so
I'm
intrigued by
definitely
so much more of this because it's a topic that we want to focus on highly, especially within this community, is coming back, having that resilience, and being able to train your brain to have that resilience too, because there are so many different ways to get hurt in the sports that we all do, that we all love, and it's not if, it's when, but it's also it's you can hit the ground but still make sure to avoid injury by having your body trained the right way, and that's a big piece we want to focus on. But I think that might be a topic for another week, is getting to talk about training the brain for that resilience that you're talking about, and the visualization and what that does for you. Of, if you can fear a future that hasn't happened yet, why can't you be excited for a future that hasn't happened yet? And I think that your friend, I mean, just to hear he's okay from that is amazing, and the strength that he had for that. And then it's cool to see now that you got to witness that firsthand, and then
Mm.
later on study the neuroscience behind it. So
Mm.
just to wrap up kind of that thought before we do open the room for Q&A, what would be your take on what you would say for other people, since you didn't experience it yourself, but you saw somebody else have to work through those battles?
First of all, don't take the drugs.
I
Like,
second that one.
yeah. From a neuroscience perspective, do not take the drugs. Just Tylenol,
Mm.
marijuana,
Mhm.
which can be a whole nother conversation. Um, those two are the best painkillers. Just take
Mhm.
Tylenol, ibuprofen, and honestly THC. Those three things are incredible painkillers for things like that. And if you're injured and you're down and out, always do what you can, because you always can. Even if it's not in the same way that it was before, you always can, whether it be mentally visualizing, verbally speaking it into existence, playing video games, whatever. Do what you can, and that will always build into what you dream of. Just constantly stay positive and don't ever stop doing.
Yes, I second that. I love that.
Heck yeah. Cool.
Um,
Well, I guess I've got one last thing that I've been curious about that I think it would be a good segue into a Q&A. And it is a question that we got kind of on one of the posts for this,
Mhm.
and one that I have personal experience with. But I'm curious about concussions
Mm,
and traumatic brain injury. And
mhm,
we've talked about coming back from injury, but when it specifically is an injury to your brain, what does concussion do to your cognitive state, your intelligence, your neuroplasticity? Maybe what does that affect? And then what tools exist, what practices exist, what can you do to rebuild and then continue to build further what was damaged?
mm. That's a tough one. Concussions are really interesting because no concussion is exactly the same. Um, you can damage different parts of your brain depending on the type of impact that you take. And if you are concussed, you are impacting your neuroplasticity or decreasing your neuroplasticity in that area of the brain that you have the impact on, or that you have the damage in. And also, depending on the area of the brain that's damaged, will influence what you can do to fix it, so to speak. So, although it's not necessarily understood that neurons themselves regenerate after they're damaged. We do know that you can increase the communication between neurons. So the phone itself might be dead forever, but the neighboring phones can be enhanced to make up for the damage or to make up for the loss of that one phone, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
So if you, depending on the part of the brain that you damage, will substantially influence like what you can do to fix it. But ultimately, what it always comes to is making sure that you just don't stop. If it's the part of your brain that maybe has something to do with memory, then you just play memory games. Continue to challenge that part of your brain. If it's a part of your brain that has something to do with motion or even like balance, just continue to challenge that part, and you can definitely come back from some pretty serious injuries for sure.
Interesting.
Well,
I've definitely got tons of questions too, but
yeah,
probably enough for several episodes. So maybe we'll save some for later. Really, I know we got to talk a little bit about the psychedelic aspect and what
Yes.
all of that is kind of a whole other side of your studies and research, and a lot of things you're doing now with your research, which I don't want to open that box because we'll be here for another 4 hours. But
Oh, definitely.
but fascinated to know. We've talked about like the tools that can help you recover from things like, continuing to challenge your brain and how that can reconnect and refire some of those synapses and rebuild some of those connections and strengthen your brain in ways even past its development stages. But curious, maybe is there a short way to kind of almost like introduce a little bit of the research you're doing and what some of these newer, they're all natural substances, so they're not new tools, but
Right.
maybe newly in the spotlight tools that may have some benefits and
Yeah.
things of that
Yeah,
nature.
totally. Oh, it's my favorite topic to discuss for
Yeah,
sure. Um,
and maybe even start with the concussion application. And if you need a specific, I had a traumatic brain injury, a traumatic concussion to my prefrontal cortex when I was 7 years old. That
oh wow.
apparently changed a lot of who I am as a person, and I've been that's a whole rabbit hole for another day, and maybe I'll just pick your brain on that individually. But if that's a useful application to kind of stem from, great, use it. If not, feel free to go elsewhere. But
So I
definitely,
personally don't have extensive experience with concussions other than having my own in the past from I've had a couple from horseback riding and one wakeboarding accident, but um ultimately like the best way to come back from a concussion is to take care of your brain, obviously. Do things that challenge your brain, and also by taking nootropics, which are basically just herbs, mushrooms, things like that that help uh, with neuroplasticity. Um, but specifically, the research that I do with psychedelics has to do with increasing neuroplasticity by utilization of these psychedelics. And what they do in layman's terms, which we can get into in another conversation because I can talk about this forever, but basically it causes parts of your brain to communicate that wouldn't normally communicate, so that you can understand what barriers you have in your mind that you don't really need anymore. So we work a lot with people from the VA. We work a lot with veterans who have alcohol use disorder, veterans who have PTSD, veterans who have major depressive disorder, and we give them very low amounts of DMT, which comes from ayahuasca. And it also comes from, you've heard of people licking frogs and tripping from licking frogs. It's the same chemical. And our brains actually produce it as well, which is why we like to use it in our lab, is because our bodies already have a natural way of metabolizing it, so you don't build up a tolerance to it. So we give a very, very small amount of DMT via IV and sit the patient down with their therapist. And basically, as the therapist is talking them through this trip, which we're not giving them enough for them to speak to God by any means, but enough for them to kind of lower their guard and facilitate, a deeper connection with their therapist. But basically, like, the therapist talks them through what they're experiencing and kind of helps them search parts of their mind that they have subconsciously shut off because of traumatic instances in their past. And they can see themselves cause them to feel more confident in who they are without their, disorders, but it also can cause their brain to break down neuronal connections that would have therefore been used as defense mechanisms, or kind of closing off parts of the brain that they didn't ever really want to have to, or parts of their memory that they never really wanted to have to come back into contact with. So for veterans, I'm sure you can imagine why this is such a huge deal. The things that they experience is things that we can't even begin to imagine ourselves. And by giving them these drugs, they're able to say, oh my gosh, like, I remember when that happened. It wasn't my fault. Or I remember when that happened. My friends wouldn't want me to feel this way. There's been a beautiful example of this is there was Alexander Shulgin is the chemist who developed MDMA, also known as ecstasy. It was not developed to be a party drug. It was developed for the utilization of helping people with mental disorders. And when they started using it with people from the VA, one of his very first patients took it, and within the first 30 minutes of his dose, he stood up and he said, oh my God, I have PTSD because I see it as a way for me to connect with the veterans that I lost, my friends that I lost when I was in the field. If these people were here, they wouldn't want to see me miserable like this. They wouldn't want to see me, sad and drinking all the time. They would want to see me happy. And he ended up not even finishing his several months of therapy because of that first trip that he had with the MDMA.
Wow.
There's an incredible book about this, and it actually touches on it in the book that I read that got me, like, full circle back to the beginning. The book that got me into neuroscience, it's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. It was written by Dr. Rick Strassman, who's a friend of mine. Phenomenal person. I highly recommend it. It talks about LSD, DMT, MDMA, the roots of when these drugs were developed, how they were used in the beginning, and then how the war on drugs actually turned society against them. And now we're back into what we're calling the psychedelic renaissance, where we're bringing back these drugs to treat people, specifically veterans. It's a really, really interesting book. I highly, highly recommend it. But he talks about all of these different instances, and you can read like firsthand experiences of these people who went through these therapeutic treatments. And it's absolute. I get a little emotional when I think about it, to be honest with you. It will change your perspective on all of it, because the positive impact that these drugs have when they're used in the right environment. It's all about mindset and environment. When they're used with the right mindset in the right environment, can change people's lives, like people who you would have never imagined could ever come back from the things that they experienced. So,
and they're so demonized.
Yeah.
It's
really
going to
sad.
be interesting to see the studies that will get to come of it.
Oh yeah.
Can we attempt to, like, 30,000 foot view, just know, like, how big picture can we get and say, what do these psychedelic compounds do to your brain, and why do they work? Like, are they? I have an idea of how I would guess, but I'm not the expert. So, like,
well, yeah, we're still learning that. That is a very interesting field of research. We don't necessarily fully understand the mechanisms at work, other than the fact that different psychedelics trigger different pathways. So there's this one specific pathway called the serotonergic pathway, which is what triggers serotonin. You can also trigger the dopaminergic pathway, which triggers dopamine, which we discussed before, motivation and movement. The serotonergic pathway is really interesting, though, because something about the serotonergic pathway is what gives us, like, whenever you increase, or whenever you, like, I don't want to say increase, but whenever you, like, really trigger the serotonergic pathway, you start getting the visual hallucinations. You start getting sometimes auditory hallucinations, and it enables new connections in your mind. So what these psychedelics are doing, what most of these psychedelics are doing, is they're triggering the dopaminergic pathway and the serotonergic pathway, and it's making your mind see the world from a new perspective. It mechanicalistically shifts your entire perception of reality. And as long as you're entering these psychedelic trips with the right mindset, not to party, not to just have a good time, not to, escape. It's not an escape. It's really to enter into a new version of yourself. As long as you're using these drugs with the right mindset and in the right setting with a therapist in a controlled area, you really can change your perspective of the world around you and also yourself. Now, neurologically, we're not entirely sure how these things are so powerful, but we know that they are so powerful. And that's kind of like the research that I'm getting into, is to understand exactly like why these things do the things that they do. Which the DMT that we produce in our brain is theorized to kind of be the key to why psychedelics impact us so deeply, because DMT triggers the dopaminergic and serotonergic pathways, but we don't really know exactly how. We don't know how much DMT our brains are producing. We don't know why we're producing the DMT, but we do know that it triggers the exact same pathways as all psychedelics. So once we understand that, then we can continue to build off of that and say, oh, okay, like this is what the psychedelics are doing to help people and to, induce new neuronal pathways and to strengthen our mind and to let our boundaries down. And then we can possibly start developing new forms of therapy from that without having to use things that are so potent. But at the same time, it could be the potency that really makes them work as well as they do. We really don't know. It's all a very new field of study, but yeah, it's definitely something that I firmly believe in. We need more funding in. And I think, like what you were saying, the demonization of it is totally misplaced. If you look statistically, the benefits from these drugs is absolutely astronomical compared to just regular verbal therapy or any other drug that they try to give us to make us numb or what have you. They're beautiful. They really are.
It's the fact that the drugs that numb us are not demonized. They're not illegal. The things that numb us is what they prescribe us, is what blows my mind. And
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious more to your point of, you said the drastic benefit. Of course, it'd be probably a little bit hard to give a placebo of a psychedelic. I know you said they give it at very small doses, but for a person, can you, have there been placebo studies to find out if somebody were simply open and in a deep meditative state? Because that's what I've worked on for myself, is just being aware, identifying the problems, sitting with it and trying to correct where I want my brain to process certain things coming in. And also, I don't remember what it was that you said when you were kind of on your deep dive, but it kind of gave me that thought and perspective of rewiring your brain, even with the perspective of fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what? Maybe
Yeah,
we
there's power in that.
So, yeah.
There's certainly power in faking it until you make it. And I think fake it till you make it is just using more words to say you're manifesting it. There's definitely some truth behind it. Mm-hmm. So the question was exactly, what was your question exactly with that?
Is there direct comparison of placebos with
The placebo, yeah.
or even just your take on it, of somebody, somebody that doesn't have access to these clinical trials, somebody that doesn't have the safe environment. We don't want to go encouraging people to use the D1 drugs.
No.
It's the alternative options that you would recommend to people, that from your experience. Would you have any feedback on that?
Sure. So, one comment about the placebo: whenever we're testing or whenever we're working with these drugs to try to figure out like the right dosage and things like that, like obviously placebo would be ideal. You want to do like a double-blind study where neither the researcher nor the person who's receiving the drug knows how much or what exactly they're getting, if they're getting placebo or if they're getting the DMT, LSD, whatever. But obviously, when you're working with psychedelics, like, you'll know that you're on a psychedelic. There's no question about that. If you get a placebo, you'll know that you're stone cold sober. So oftentimes what we do in research is we'll say, you're either going to get the psychedelic that we're going to give you, or you're going to get THC. We use THC often as our placebo. So I thought that's a really interesting thing. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is, when I learned that, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Like, I would know if I'm on LSD. I would know if I'm, getting some sort of I would know if I'm getting some dosage of psilocybin, but I would also know if I was completely sober and just getting like sugar water.
Right.
But yeah, we often use THC. But for people who don't have access to these types of clinical studies or trials or whatever, like if you don't have a college near, well, if you want to do it, look for large universities near you, because oftentimes those large universities are doing some sort of research with psychedelics. I would definitely recommend staying with like kind of your larger schools rather than your smaller schools, just for the mere fact of resources that they have. It's really, really difficult to get the certifications and the federal approval to work with these drugs. And smaller schools just typically don't have the type of funding. So I mean, there may be some small schools out there that are doing some extraordinary research with it that I just don't know about. But statistically speaking and logically speaking, I would say look for your larger schools that you're close to, especially your Ivies. Every Ivy League school, for whatever weird reason, has like kind of taken to their own psychedelic drug. Yale does a lot with DMT and LSD. I know Brown does a lot with MDMA. MIT, I believe, does a lot with DMT and psilocybin. But anyway, if you don't have access to that, meditation is huge. Meditation is a great way to just come into that like part of yourself. And there's actually theories that when you go into a deep meditative state, you're actually increasing the DMT that your brain is producing, which is itself known as being a neuroplastinogen in rats and cats and other questionable research projects. It has been shown that every psychedelic is a neuroplastinogen, and that's why it's important to make sure that the setting that you're in is ideal, because you'll either learn something fantastic about yourself or you could scare yourself if you're not using it properly. But a meditative state is a nice placebo, calm, cool, collected way to potentially increase the amount of DMT that your brain is producing, and to kind of explore parts of yourself without having to expose yourself to these drugs exogenously or through an IV or whatever.
Fascinating.
Very cool.
Well, maybe one more point and then we can wrap up.
Sure.
You mentioned manifestation, and this is we kind of touched on it earlier about, creating new neural pathways, and when about coming back from injuries, coming back from incidences, it's really important to visualize or do what you can. Even if you can't go ride your bike again right now because your leg's broken, can you visualize it? Can you practice it? I'm curious if you could, how do we operationalize manifestation?
Yes.
Okay, so it's funny. I love this conversation. This is one of my favorite things. Have you ever gone into your bedroom and gone through an argument in your head? You're preparing yourself in your head. This is what this person's going to say, and this is how I'm going to respond to it. That's exactly the same thing that you're doing whenever you're visualizing. You're mentally preparing yourself for something. And there are studies that are done that of people who it's so cool. There's been studies done of people who were told, do not work out, don't go to the gym, don't touch a single weight, but go home and sit for an hour every day and imagine that you're lifting weights. After that month, the people who did that actually had growth in their muscle. You're triggering those parts of your brain that genuinely believe that you're moving. You could sit there and not lift a single weight and just do this and think that you're moving the weight, and it actually increases protein synthesis or muscular synthesis, or androgen. I don't know. I can't say that word. It increases muscle growth, and by sitting and thinking about it, you can trigger the parts of your brain that truly believe it. And just like you've sat and thought about, okay, I've got this interview coming up. These are the things that I want to make sure that I let them know about me. You're mentally preparing yourself for that moment. So whenever it comes, you're ready. That's already there. It's already happened in your head. It's exactly the same thing whenever you're talking about doing something physically. If you think it, you can make it happen. Like, you're just preparing that pathway in that grass field. It's a very, very real thing. There's plenty of studies there was a study done on women who wanted bigger breasts. This is a crazy thing. It's a true study. These women wanted bigger breasts, and they went through the therapy for just thinking, okay, you sit for 1 hour a day and you just think that think about having bigger breasts, and they had an increase in chest size over, I think it was something like 8 weeks or something like that. I think it was 9 out of 10 women ended up having. It's the same thing.
It wasn't like a body dysmorphia. It was actually legitimate.
It was actually synthesized, yeah. Physically
Huh.
synthesized, yeah. Yeah. I'll find these papers and I can email them to you guys so you can post them if you want. These are like
Sure.
real
Fascinating.
projects that were done. Really interesting. Yeah. Manifestation is a very, very real thing, whether it be psychologically or physically or anything in between. Absolutely.
Mm. I mean, especially as an athlete, people see it all the time where, I mean, you look at racers, you look at competitive athletes of any sport. This isn't new news of
Mhm.
sit and visualize it because as you said, it's not your first time running it through your head. So you get out on the field, you get out on the course, you get out on the track, and you have to see yourself winning. Every champion believes they are a champion and losing isn't an option. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of people that see themselves as just an average individual, they don't see themselves as a competitive athlete. I think they let visualization go from their life. They, you know, I know with my own writing, it still takes stepping stones even in my own brain. I
Mhm.
can't visualize myself doing something that is actually that unrealistic, but I visualize myself with stepping stones of each time I go out and ride my bike, I'm stacking more skills that are getting me closer and closer and closer, and I'm pushing myself every session because it makes it more fun. But it's looking at a set of dirt jumps that's full commit, anything gapped that, it could be a rock drop, it can be a variety of things. If you can't see yourself doing it, you're going to get up to it and likely panic. And I do think a lot of people don't have to go through that. Some
Yeah.
people just rip off the band-aid and go. But I
Mhm.
personally have to run through that. And I think I've talked with a lot of women riders too that they feel like they resonate with that more than male riders. So I'm
Mhm.
curious about, we're opening a
Yeah.
whole nother can of worms that could be a topic for discussion. But
I
Well,
think
I think oh, go ahead.
I think that visualization is a perfect example of
Yeah.
operationalizing manifestation. And that, I mean, sports psychology 101 is just close your eyes and imagine yourself doing the thing successfully.
Mhm.
Whether it's, and I learned this when I was playing lacrosse in college and before college, and it's something that downhill racers do constantly, free riders do constantly. Rampage
Mhm.
coming up, like
Yep.
they're
I was gonna
building
say that.
jumps. They're building jumps that have never existed, that nobody's ever ridden before, and somebody's got to try it. And
Yeah.
and the best way that they, like Ali was saying with other features, the best way to prepare to do the thing is not just say, you know, it's not like a kid wishing for what he wants for Christmas, and I hope it shows up. It's no,
putting in the work.
mentally, like
Manifestation is
doing
lining yourself up for the
like
work that you have to
doing
do.
the mental reps of what is it going to look like when I roll in at this speed? What is it going to look like when I come up to the lip? When am I going to see the gap that I have to jump across? Is that speed going to work? And then with repetitions, I guess my assumption is that you're starting to kind of, you can't walk the whole, if you're in the middle of the grass field and you want to walk to the tree, you can't walk the whole way, but you can start, eventually you got one shot to run the path, right. But you can start to kind of piece it together one piece at a time just by
Yep.
visualizing it.
Yep,
So
just
that,
combing those blades of grass over, yeah, exactly, even if it's one
that
blade of grass at a time, you're starting, absolutely,
yeah,
100%,
that's
and
cool.
it is shown, and I hate to I'm so anti, like, gender norms and whatever, but men and women are different, and,
Absolutely.
evolutionarily speaking, women are understood to be better planners. Men are the ones who, if you're talking about, like, Neanderthals and, like,
Mm.
pre-human hominoids or whatever. Um, the men were typically the ones that went out to do, but
Mhm.
now it is being found that the women were the ones who were better at planning. And so what you're saying is about like women are typically the ones that visualize more. You
That's
hear
right.
you get women that kind of relate to that idea more. That makes perfect sense. That makes
Mhm.
perfect sense. We want to be able to like see the whole thing and then we can do whereas guys are I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense that women would definitely understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious deeper brain wiring on that side. That's one that I've
Yeah.
been kind of looking into.
Mhm.
But um
Cool.
maybe we end on a final question just to wrap things up on our time and like kind of to segue on that same topic. What would you say, just to end on it, what's one thing that you would recommend for people that how could they train their brain like an athlete this week? Like
Mhm.
what is a change you can make in your day by day or your weekly routine to help with those neuropathways and train your brain like an athlete? And when I say athlete, I mean somebody that just wants to stay active for life.
Mhm. I think it's important to remember that your brain is just as important as your body. Like, it's easy for people to say, like, oh, as you get older, you have to stay moving, da 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 da. But you also have to continue to challenge your brain. I think having, if you want to treat yourself like an athlete, you have to put the effort in, and you also need the rest. And you also need to eat properly. I think those are like, that's kind of like the holy trinity for me, is you put the effort in, you rest, and you have to fuel yourself. Those three things, you can't have one without the other and expect to have the exact same results. So taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. And both of those things require you to fuel yourself properly and be kind to yourself. Don't expect too much of yourself. You have to be kind to yourself. Like, speaking of trying to visualize yourself doing something incredible, just because you can don't be hard on yourself if you can't see yourself being able to do that thing. And then also don't be hard on yourself if you could see yourself doing it and you didn't succeed the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think being an athlete is way more than just challenging your body. It's taking care of your mind as well. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. No, that's huge. It's definitely what we live by. So thank you for definitely validating for me, at least.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, no, thank you so much for that. That is honestly, this whole conversation, there's so many other things I would love to dive deeper onto, and we already got to take a whole hour of it. So,
well, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I would be more than happy to come back anytime you guys would like, for sure. And my friend who broke his back, I'm sure, would be happy to speak as well. I think he probably has a couple things he'd like to say.
That would be amazing. Yeah, we'll be in touch about that for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Kaycee.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're the best.